QSO Today, episode 378, Pablo Lewin WA6RSV. My thanks to ICOM America for sponsoring the QSO Today podcast. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, amateur call sign 4Z1UG, where I demonstrate the diversity and relevance of the amateur radio hobby and its impact on society by interviewing ham radio operators, many of whom played vital roles in shaping our technology through the amateur radio hobby. And while many people might say, ham radio, do people still do that? This podcast demonstrates through in-depth interviews just how amazing, diverse, and dynamic the amateur radio hobby continues to be. The QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo returns on March 13th, 2022. If you have a ham radio subject that you'd like to present at the expo, please use the link on the show notes page to get to the expo website, and then click on the Call for Speakers and Presentations box. In addition, we created a copper-level sponsorship to allow your radio club, organization, or small business to appear as an exhibitor in the expo. If you want to extend the reach of your organization, please consider coming to the expo as a sponsor. Please contact me for more information. Pablo Lewin WA6RSV was a speaker at the QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo last August 2021 with his presentation on his hydrogen line radio telescope using software-defined radio, or SDR. Pablo had an interesting aviation career where amateur radio weaved in and out of it since the late 70s. This new career phase has Pablo creating content for the film and television industry as well as doing stand-up comedy. WA6RSV tells his amateur radio story in this QSO Today. WA6RSV, this is Eric, 4Z1UG. Are you there, Pablo?
Yes, hi, Eric, 4Z1UG, WA6RSV, Glendora, California, USA.
Pablo, thanks for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start at the beginning of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
Well, it started back in 1973. My dad, who was a taxi driver in Buenos Aires, Argentina, decided to get into electronics. So he would go to electronics schools, and I would go with him, and he built a little transmitter, and I was fascinated by the fact that you could actually transmit your voice across distances. And then when my dad left for the U.S. in 1974, I missed him so much that I decided, hey, maybe I can get away, because there was no internet or anything like that. Maybe there's a way that I can contact him. And so I went to the Buenos Aires Radio Club. That was Lima United 4 Bravo Bravo. And I got trained in 1974, and eventually got my novice license in 74 as Lima United 4 Charlie Alpha Romeo. And then I had a mentor. His name was Elias, Lima United 5 Charlie Whiskey, and he let me have his transmitter, one valve. I think it was a 6DQ6 AM 80-meter transmitter. And a friend of mine, I borrowed one of those U.S. Vintage WW2 airplane BC 584 or something like that, receivers, and just one length of wire, and I started talking to people all over the world. Not all over the world, all over South America.
Do you remember how the Argentinian licensing structure was for amateur radio? Was it similar to the United States?
Well, no, you had an apprentice. You had to be an apprentice, ham radio operator for 6, 7, 8 months. I don't remember how long. And you had to be recommended. This is at the time. And we're talking about ancient times. So I don't know how it is now.
But we tell ancient stories here.
Back there, you had to have an apprenticeship program. And so at the Lima United 4 Bravo Bravo, the radio club, you would be slowly allowed to actually get on the air with the help of other ham radio operators, and then eventually they would let you handle the transmitter. It was a separate transmitter, separate receiver, all valve vacuum tubes, and eventually when you graduated is when they would let you actually operate the radios yourself. And you're bringing back memories that were hitting for 40-some years now, so I'm remembering.
What did you think of that, being on the air the first time?
I was really scared at the beginning, and then eventually I was fascinated. And before that, actually, somebody actually loaned me, even before I became a ham radio operator, licensed one, somebody loaned me a CB radio, vacuum tube CB radio, which I set up on the top of my apartment building with a wire, and I was able to contact one time Brazilian station. I couldn't believe it. It was to this day, it was the most exciting experience that I've ever had, that I could actually get on the air. So it was really exciting. It became part of my DNA.
Did your father also become a ham?
No. Yes, eventually in the United States, he did become a ham radio operator, and in fact, he would be on the air speaking to ham radio operators, mainly in Argentina and in Israel. He had some Argentinian friends in Israel, so he would get on with my call sign. I was present, I was the
control operator.
Control operator, and so he had a lot of friends, but that was eventually back here in the States, but not in Argentina. He left.
When did you immigrate to America?
1976.
Did you go to California?
Immediately to Los Angeles, landed here. I was surprised that there were no tall buildings and skyscrapers. I was used to in Buenos Aires to have, any of the listeners have been there, but it's a huge metropolis like New York or Chicago, and I was struck by the fact that the sky was so big because there were no buildings. Plus, I went to South Central Los Angeles. That's where my apartment was at the time, Southgate.
Now, when you came to America, were you an English speaker?
Not at all. Didn't speak a word of English. Zero. I knew a couple of Beatles songs by rote. I had no idea what they were singing about. And I started from ground zero.
How did that go for you?
It was a traumatic experience, but luckily I went to Bell High School. And, it was junior high school. And I went immediately into an ESL class where they only spoke English. And so that was very hard. English is very hard for those of us who spoke Spanish.
And was your Spanish the same Spanish that the Mexican population of Los Angeles spoke?
Well, whenever a Mexican goes to school, or an Argentinian or Guatemalan, they learn standard Spanish. But once they're let out into the whole world, and then everybody has their own accents and meanings for different words, not unlike British English and or Australian English and American English, or New York English and LA English. There are many differences. So it was very hard. When I landed in Southgate, my first friends were Cubans, and they speak at 100 miles an hour, so I didn't understand a word they were saying. It took me a long time. Did
you get your amateur radio license in the United States right away, or did you operate as a visitor using your Argentinian call sign?
Yeah, the first thing I did was my dad had met a ham radio operator, fantastic guy. His name was Reed Craven, SK, WB6BFK. Fantastic guy. And he would invite us over to his ham station. He would let us talk to family in Argentina and everything else. So I immediately got my reciprocal license, Lima United 4 Charlie Alpha Romeo Portable W6. And eventually I started studying with his help, and I went to the FCC in Long Beach, California, and I passed my novice license WA6RSV, which is I've had ever since. I never wanted to change it.
Did you join a radio club in Southern California?
No, I did not, but I was in contact with WB6BFK and his radio club, so I would sometimes attend. But I was going to school, learning English, and at the time I was learning how to fly an airplane. So I was about 17 when I started flying airplanes at Almani Airport, and so I was pretty busy.
Ham radio didn't play a part then in the choices that you made for your education and career. You had an interest and love of flying.
I had an interest on being an astronaut since I was everybody tells me that even when I was 3 years old, I was playing with paper airplanes and flying them around. So, and then when my dad left, there was a need for me to be with my dad. So I saw him that he got on an airplane. I got for some reason, it sparked a tremendous desire to fly airplanes for a living. And ever since I can remember, I never had any desire to be a pilot.
So then what happens after that? You graduate from high school. How does one become a pilot from there?
When I graduated from high school, I was 18. I had already gotten my commercial pilot's certificate and my CFI, Certified Flight Instructor. So I started instructing for a living out of El Monte Airport. And then I transferred to Mount San Antonio College, which is a 2-year college. And they had a fantastic aviation program. They still do. And I went to Mount SAC, got my AS degree, and then with that I transferred to Cal State LA, which had another aviation program. And so I got 4 years of that. In the meantime, I was flying. I was doing ham radio constantly because ham radio has been part of my DNA constantly since the time I started. There was never a year where I didn't have a radio or I didn't get on the air. It was, like I said, it's part of my DNA. I can't help it.
So once you landed in Los Angeles, I'm assuming that by the time that you got your RSV call sign, that you had some radios of your own. What were you operating in those days as you're getting your flying credentials?
I believe I started with my first radio. It was mobile because I couldn't get on the apartment building. They wouldn't allow me to put up an antenna. So we would get on the air with my dad driving down the 10 freeway, basically, with a little high gain stick, 20 meters, and a single band 20-meter transceiver. I believe it was a Heathkit SB something.
The single banders.
Single banders, and I remember clearly we were driving on the freeway one day, on the 10 freeway. I don't know if it was westbound or eastbound. And I started transmitting, and lo and behold, from Los Angeles, I was able to contact a station from Buenos Aires, Argentina. We had a conversation. My dad was amazed. He couldn't believe it. You know, you got to remember, this is at a time before the internet. This is at a time when a phone call to Buenos Aires, Argentina was $5 a minute, and that was $5 in the 70s.
Right. That was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money. My dad used to make $5 an hour as a tool crib operator at the time until he got his best job as a city bus driver for the Rapid Transit District, Southern California Rapid Transit District. So, wow, we could actually talk to people all over the world from the car. It was amazing. We were on fire.
Then what happened after that?
Well, after that, I was working as a flight instructor all through that. And after that, I went to and started, and I said, hey, maybe I can fly a jet. So I started calling people around Los Angeles that flew jets, Lear jets, and everything else. And I go, hey, I have a 4-year degree in an airline transport rating with about 300 hours of multi-engine time prop. What does it take to fly a jet? Yeah, well, do you have any jet time? No. Well, call us when you do. So I kept calling, to make a long story short, until Clay Lacey Aviation out of Van Nuys. And I said, hey, my name is Pablo. I got a 4-year degree in aviation, and I got about 1,500 hours and 300 hours multi-engine. And the guy goes, well, come on down. Let's do an interview. So I interviewed, and they invited me to ground school, me and 4 other guys. I passed the ground school. Ground school is where you study the systems, the rules, and everything else for that certain company. I was already a licensed or certificated airline transport pilot, which means that I passed the test and to fly multi-engine aircraft and under airline transport rules. Get into that. Anyway, so we passed. They put us in a Learjet. I've never flown a Learjet. Now, you have to understand, it was a Lear 24. Straight jets, no turbofans, and that airplane is a rocket. It's truly the closest you can get to a fighter jet in the civilian world. I've never flown anything. Neither have all the other three guys. So we were all over the sky, literally. But we passed. So the guy says, well, we got to choose two people, and they chose two other people, not me. So I went to them and I go, hey, listen, you already trained me. I already passed. I did just as badly and as well as the other guys. They're going to get sick. So I'm going to stand by for you for a whole year. You don't have to pay me. Call me when they get sick or something. So to make a long story short, they called me for a whole year, and I flew 70 hours of jet time in a whole year. I made $2,500 that whole year, starving to death, but it doesn't matter. Now I was a jet pilot. I was a high performance jet pilot. So the next year I went and started calling people. Hey, I'd like to fly your jets. Do you have any jet time? Of course. And I have a certificate as a first officer in a Learjet. Come on in. And then I took off from there. And then I started flying jets. I got about 3,000 hours in Learjets. And then I started applying to all the airlines. And I applied to TWA, which I didn't think that they would hire me at the time. And they did hire me. And I was hired in 1988 as an airline pilot. I was 28. And then on until I became a captain in 98. And American Airlines bought us. And it was until last year when I retired.
And now this message from ICOM America. Spice up your ham shack with ICOM's IC705. This portable radio is perfect for staying in and venturing out and working your favorite bands this winter season. Happy holidays from ICOM. The ICOM IC705 is the perfect sidekick and QRP companion. Base station features and functionality at the tip of your fingertips in a portable package covering HF 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. This compact rig weighs in at just over 2 pounds, with RF direct sampling for most of the HF band and IF sampling for frequencies above 25 megahertz. It has a 4.3-inch touchscreen with live band scope and waterfall display, 5 watts with a BP272, 10 watts with the 13.8 volts DC power supply, single sideband CW, AM, FM, as well as full D-Star functionality. A touchscreen display, micro USB connector, Bluetooth, and wireless LAN, integrated GPS with antenna and GPS logger, micro SD card slot, speaker microphone using the HM243, and it comes standard. It supports QRP and QRPP operations. The perfect accessory for the IC705 is the optional LC192 backpack, with its special compartment for your IC705 and room for accessories for SOTA activations or a day out in the wild. Our family of favorite ICOM amateur radios are also available this holiday season. The IC9700, the IC9300, the IC7610 base stations, the ID52A handheld coming soon, and the ID5100A mobile are the perfect gifts, and it's the most wonderful time of the year to give a gift of ICOM. For more information, click on the ICOM banner in this week's show notes page, and when you purchase your new ICOM rig, please tell your dealer that you heard about it here on QSO Today. And now back to our QSO. Are there any VIPs that you flew in the Learjet that gave you the most memorable ride?
Absolutely. At Clay Lacy Aviation and National Jet, after that I flew movie stars from Robert Redford to Elizabeth Taylor, the singer Prince, John McEnroe, who, by the way, happened to be a fantastic passenger, super nice. Because everybody remembers John McEnroe, the tennis player, as being somebody who's not unsavory, because in real life he was one of the nicest passengers I've ever had. Super nice guy. So, yeah, I did fly a lot of famous people, rich people, head of the Nestle Corporation when I flew a jet to Europe.
One of the most beautiful jets in my mind is the Citation 10. Did you ever fly one of those?
Not the Citation 10, but a Citation. I'm also type-rated in Citation, the Citation 3, I believe it is. I got to look at my certificate.
Beautiful jets.
They're beautiful. They're super high performance, the 10. More than the Learjet is passé right now. It's still a great airplane. It's a pilot's airplane. You got to be on the ball when you're flying that, or it will kill you. Especially in engine out at V1, which is the takeoff decision speed. If you lose an, especially the Lear 24, you got to understand that the old Lears, they were straight jets, not turbofans.
And what's the difference for the audience and for me?
The difference for the audience is that with a straight jet, first of all, you have a lot of immediate power, immediate reaction. There's no lag when you advance the throttle on a turbofan on any jet. There's a lag for the engine to stabilize and start accelerating. With a straight jet, if you ram the power, which you don't ram the power, but if you accelerate, it's immediate acceleration and tremendous fuel consumption and noise. And so if you lost an engine, even though the engines were on the tail in Learjet, there was so much power to weight ratio that you have to apply immediate corrective rudder action when you're on the runway, or you're going to flip. Or even in the air, if you're flying single engine, and if you have to make sure that you're fast on the rudder and correct, precise. In other words, the aircraft has to be coordinated, very coordinated at all times in power settings. So you got to be fast.
How do you train for that, Pablo? Did they take the jet out over the Pacific Ocean?
At the time when I got checked out in Learjets in '84, very few simulators. Eventually you go to the simulators, and now it's 100% simulators. But when I got trained, the Learjet, and even in the Boeing 767 with TWA, I mean, you train in the simulator, but they were not super sophisticated simulators like now. So you have to actually go on an empty 767-200, and you had to actually fly the airplane single engine with the other engine on idle. You wouldn't shut it down. But now you do that simulators. They use simulators 100%.
It's cheaper and safer.
Safer.
Okay, so let's go back to ham radio for all of us who've taken this interesting detour into aviation. What's your favorite operating mode?
Well, right now, FT8, because I call it the Amazon of ham radio. Basically, you order it, and it just happens to be there. I don't know, and it allows me to do other things when I'm actually racking up the contacts. I was heavy on CW, Morse code all the time. When I got my extra, I had to pass the 20 word per minute, 1 minute perfect, 5 minutes total. And so I still do get on CW. I've never learned the keyer. I can do 20 to 25 words a minute with straight key.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, it's still easier for me to get on a straight key, and I have a replica of the Titanic, one of those Kent keys, and it's easier for me to do it that. Lately, I do Whisper also. I have 2 transmitters right now, 2 Zartec 200 milliwatt transmitters that are on 24/7 on Whisper, and that's very exciting too, to see how far 200 milliwatts get on bad antennas.
And what are you learning? I mean, what are you seeing with 200 milliwatts on bad antennas?
Well, I mean, for those who are listening, they can go to the WhisperNet and just enter WA6RSV, and you'll see that I'm getting to the 5 continents, including Antarctica, with 200 milliwatts and a vertical antenna on one, and the other one is just a little single wire. It's amazing. Europe, Africa, certainly for those of us in Southern California, Japan and Australia, it's really easy. And so that's easy right there. But to get to Australia, especially since I live 3 blocks from the mountains, San Gabriel Mountains, so my low-angle radiation to Europe is
non-existent.
Right. So that, for me, is the hardest part. But I'm still getting there with 200 milliwatts. I mean, the key is that it's the time of the day, I guess, propagation.
On what bands are you operating Whisper?
All the bands. All the HF from 10 meters to 80 meters.
So are they like sequencing and sending a message in each band?
Yeah, they actually have on their program, they have a way to actually sequence that. So it'll transmit at a certain time at a certain frequency. So you can actually use 2 transmitters.
Well, it seems to me that with your log, then, you could actually create a very nice propagation map from your house.
Yeah, well, there are websites that actually do that for you. Maybe I should tell you what they are.
As PSK Reporter, I think?
No, actually, you don't want to go to PSK Reporter. That's not as good. You can go to, let me see here, DX Explorer, dxplorer.net/whisper. And it'll create graphs and diagrams. And then the other one is wspr.rocks. And that creates complete graphs and on your Whisper transmitter. And the nice thing is you just set it and forget it. And that thing, and then you can, I have the whispernet.org displayed here, and it's telling me where my signal is being received. And also there are some apps that you can go to. But it's very exciting. I'm a ham radio nut. We haven't gotten into all the antennas and equipment that I have here on this property, which rivals that of any embassy in Iraq.
Right. Glendora is what, just east of Pasadena?
Yes, it's still within Los Angeles County, but it's east of Pasadena.
So you're in the foothills. Do you have elevation where you're at? Do you have a view from your house across the basin?
Yeah, at 225-meter elevation.
Above sea level?
Above sea level.
What's the noise floor look like in Glendora? I mean, you have all of this equipment and all these antennas. Is it still quite usable?
Quite usable. The noise level is not that bad at all. I have a radio telescope that I'm receiving galactic hydrogen 1.
What are the rigs that you're using now?
Well, I'm in the main house right now, and in the main house, I have an inverted V, a G5RV, and I have the Yaesu FT991, and this is for the main house. Also, I have a 6-meter 5-element beam so that I can work FT8 and other modes. I'm trying to get on somebody to get on Q65. In the back house, that's where the real ham radio shack is at. And then I have a bunch of radios from TS-2000s to transverters to TS-450s, 530s, Swans.
Oh, so you're a collector.
I have a collection of old rigs.
But of boat anchors from when you were a kid, so like the 60s, 70s radios, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do.
So you have FT101?
FT101s. I have a bunch of radios. I gotta look at them again. But I have the HQ110 Holocrafters. And then there's another one, 136, I believe it is. I'd have to look. I should have prepared better.
It gives us a sense that you like the real radios, the ones that had some weight. They smelled if they weren't turned on very often. So as they're warming up, there's this kind of smell of burning dust.
Absolutely. I'm a vacuum tube guy to this day. I mean, I see a vacuum tube and it brings back a flood of memories and memories of transmitting. Yeah.
You have tactile and olfactory memory that gets reignited when you turn on one of these old radios.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
On the back house, what's the antenna farm out there?
I used to have a TH6DXX at 60 feet until the Santa Ana winds knocked it down. So now I have a modest 3-element 3 tri-bander. I have a G5RV. I have a 2.1 meter dish for 23 centimeters. I have a 24-element 24-foot boom 2-meter antenna for it. I'm trying to get on EME, which is I consider that the PhD of ham radio, and I have all the elements, but I haven't had time to actually assemble everything, but I'm getting very close. I have a bunch of verticals, Cushcraft.
You want to do EME on what band?
Both on 23 centimeters and 2 meters. I have all the elements, radios, transverters. I have to assemble it, and
I've had some guests that do EME that have said that it's probably easiest to do like EME on 1.2 gigs in terms of equipment that you need and just success in general.
Yes. Although I hear that 2 meters is also easy, and like I said, I have a 24-element antenna, 2-meter Yagi, which I mounted it. It's mounted, and all I have to do is run the coax, and I just got the coax last week. It's got to be special, low loss.
Do you actually have to put the preamp and all of that stuff at the antenna itself?
And I have the sequencer also, because if you have a preamp, you got to have a sequencer. I had no idea that I needed a sequencer, but you do, because otherwise you're going to fry that preamp in a nanosecond.
One of the reasons that we're talking is that you spoke at the last QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo in August, and your topic was building your first fully functioning hydrogen line radio telescope. How did you get into radio astronomy, and what are we looking at with your telescope?
Okay, I have many hobbies, especially since I retired from flying. And one of the hobbies that I've had for many years is amateur astronomer. And I have built a fully automated research level roll-off roof observatory in my backyard. And you say, hey, wait a minute, what can he do? Well, I have a 14-inch diameter telescope, and all fully automated. And what I do is I provide data to the NASA Transit Exoplanet Survey Satellite program. And I'm a member of the subgroup 1, which actually, when the test detects a possible transit of an exoplanet, they go to people like me, and we look into that star and see if there's an actual transit. So I've been doing pretty pictures with it. I do also asteroid detection, near Earth asteroids or objects, and I provide that information to the Minor Planet Center. So I do all kinds of things with that. And I figure, why not have something that is an extension of ham radio? I've heard about the passive hydrogen line, which is the Milky Way. The whole space, it's not really empty. It's full of hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most, as most of your listeners and you know, it's the most prevalent gas in the universe, element in the universe. And when ionized, when excited, it creates a radio transmission, to put it very, very simply, in the 1.420.405 gigahertz. And so one time I read an article about how to build a simple radio telescope, and so I did. And I've been improving ever since, and now I'm detecting the arms of the Milky Way, because the arms of the Milky Way are full of stars, full of hydrogen, and you can actually detect it with this. It's the ultimate galactic DX. I mean, it's a radio signal that's coming from the center of and from the arms of our galaxy, and there are other radio signals that you can detect with a modest sized dish.
I want to take a minute to tell you about my favorite podcast, the Ham Radio Workbench Podcast, with George, KJ6VU, and now joined by Rod, VA3ON, Mike, VA3MW, Mark, N6MTS, and Vince, VE6LK. Every 2 weeks, George and company offer up a status report on the many amateur radio projects on their workbenches and explore projects on their guests' workbenches. This group is project active and prolific, covering many technical areas of amateur radio. So the next time you want a deep dive into ham radio electronic project building, or to learn about technology, tools, test equipment, construction techniques, and the rest, listen to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, available on every podcast player and channel. Use the link in this week's show notes page to get to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast directly. And now back to my QSO. Now, in the presentation that you made, the modest-sized dish was actually very small. It looked like a small 2 gigahertz microwave grid dish. It wasn't very large. How does the software that you're using, how does it know what it's looking at? What calibrates that so that when you're pointing that dish up into the sky, that it somehow knows what it's looking at?
Well, basically, it's very simple, really. You have a program that depicts the travels of the Milky Way above your head, at the zenith, straight up. And there are many programs. A free one would be Stellarium, which are astronomy programs where you can see the different stars. So you program it with your computer timer, and then it'll show you where the Milky Way is supposed to be. So now you know where the Milky Way is supposed to be. So now you point your antenna straight up where the Milky Way, one of the Milky Way arms is supposed to pass. And if it picks up something, you know that it's the Milky Way. And it's actually confirming the program. It's confirming that there is a passage of hydrogen above you. And you can actually see the increase and decrease of signal at 1.4 gigahertz as the Milky Way, as the program depicts that the Milky Way is passing above you. As simple as that. I mean, it's as simple as I can put it. I mean, you can go from that to super sophisticated systems, but this is a great little system that can be built for less than $300 for schools, for your own enjoyment, and it proves without any doubt that indeed the hydrogen line exists. Indeed, the Milky Way is full of hydrogen, and you can actually detect the passage and make a little movie out of it, which I have.
And do you think that ham radio operators have a leg up on being radio astronomers because of our technical background with radio? Does that make it somehow easier, and do we get more out of it?
What very few people know is that the first radio astronomer in the world was a ham radio operator, and I forget his name now, Reber something, but Google it.
It's in your presentation, actually.
Yeah, it's in my presentation. But Jansky was the engineer that worked Bell Telephone, and they had a hiss, and they were receiving a hiss in their receivers, and he set up an antenna to see where that interference was coming from, and he was the first one to detect that the interference is coming from the sky, from the Milky Way. But so yeah, ham radio operators, it's natural for us to delve into that, into radio astronomy. It's radio astronomy.
When you're using like Stellarium software, the information that's being captured by your hydrogen line radio telescope, are you sharing that information with a bunch of other radio astronomers to kind of build a bigger map of what's actually happening out there?
Well, yeah. Actually, I'm a member of the Society for Amateur Radio Astronomers, SARA, and I share some of my findings. I mean, there's very little discovery that you can actually do with a very small dish. And by small dish, I mean less than 25 meters. Really, it's very limited what you can do. It's still very exciting, but yeah, they have programs that we can actually create a map, a very rough map of the radio sky, and we can do other activities. So it's really exciting and for the money. Especially to do astronomy when it's raining or during the daytime, it's really very useful and exciting. But unlike visual astronomy, where you can discover a near-Earth object and save the Earth, or you can discover the transit of an exoplanet 1,000 light years away, it's almost impossible to do any discovery with these little dishes. But it's a great demonstration tool. It's very exciting, and especially for youngsters or high schools or even colleges or astronomy instructors or teachers, they can actually demonstrate what they're teaching and create very interesting movies and data. You can the receiver is an SDR receiver, an SDR RTL SDR, which is $30 on Amazon, and the software is free. Stellarium is free. The software SDR Sharp, which connects to that SDR, it's free, and the plugin that detects and averages that signal, it's called IF plugin. That's also free. So everything's free. Everything's there for you and for you to actually do. And there is I think I've shared a link to where you can go to the to that article, and you can actually build it yourself, or you can buy it from Sarah for $295.
The RTL SDR dongle, is it actually like in the back of the dish there, and then you're running data back to your computer, or are you down converting that signal with the IF plugin that's there, and then you could run a long hunk of like RG6 or something like that back to your computer?
First of all, you got to get the dish, and then you have to build. In my case, I got the dish, and then I built what it's called a feed horn. That was goes on top of the dish that actually gets the reflection from the dish. Inside that feed horn, there is a 4.5 centimeters, actually 3.8 centimeter little active element, and that is the antenna. That's a quarter wave for 23 centimeters minus all the systematics. And from that is connected to what it's called an LNA, low noise amplifier. You can get for $40 at Noolec, Nooelec, and you connect it. You hook it up directly to that feed. Then I have from the LNA amplifier, which is tuned specifically for 1.420 gigahertz. And it's got filters. Then what I did is I feed it to another LNA at the bottom of the dish, which also has another. But you don't have to get as impressive as I did. You can do the simple one for $300, and you're still going to get amazing results. But then I put another LNA in series. So that's a low noise amplifier to get another 20 dBs out of it. And then that goes connected directly to the SDR, to the RTL SDR, which is plugged into the USB on the computer, which is at the bottom of the dish. One of the problems with USB is that you can't really extend a USB cable beyond 16 feet, but even 10 feet is too long for some of these SDRs because they need some sort of a synchronizing.
Also power from it as well, right?
Integrating power, but mainly it's synchronizing signals. So what I did is I put the used computer inside a $50 doghouse that I got at Petco, and that completely isolates it from the environment, and I connect to it through SplashTop, which is like TeamViewer. You can actually control that computer from anywhere in the world, which is what I do.
Now, what you were saying, I think, in your presentation, that you actually need a little bit of horsepower to run these software programs. So you can't really do this on a Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, you can do it on a Raspberry Pi. It's not recommended because Raspberry Pi is usually the clock frequency is about 1.4, 1.8, which is exactly the frequency that you're going to receive. And you got to remember that these receivers are extremely sensitive. So what I did is I used a computer with a clock of at least 3.4, 3.8, no Wi-Fi, no transmissions around it within 20, 30 feet as much as you can in an urban setting. And I'm getting fantastic results with that. But you don't have to get elaborate like I did. Just with a grid antenna that you can get for $50, one LNA and one RTL SDR. That's all you need, and you're gonna detect the Milky Way. I mean, we're talking about a DX that's anywhere from 30 to 50,000 light years. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And it's not a two-way communication.
Right, you're not going to get a QSL card, but you'll get the satisfaction of knowing that you looked into deep space.
It's very satisfying. And as a citizen scientist or someone who loves science, it's nice to not only believe, but actually to prove what you're reading. And this proves that what I was reading about the Milky Way having hydrogen and in the concentration of hydrogen, active hydrogen, within the arms of the Milky Way, it's true. And that's self-satisfying that I'm not a believer. I'm actually a doer. I actually proved it to myself.
Are you a member of a local ham radio club that kind of hangs out on the traditional stuff?
No. I've been pretty independent. Most of the operating that I've done. It's independent DX. I do local. Both my cars have radios. One of my cars has my call sign on it. I have a DX. Did I tell you about the Elecraft, what do you call it?
The KX2?
The KX2. Yeah, I have that.
In the car?
In the car. I have the AT-17 in the old car. No, I never had the need to join any clubs.
You're not a club goer. That's okay. I thought that perhaps you're involved in other things. It seems to me that you're a propagation ham with the Whisper, an amateur radio astronomer. That's also cool. It seems to me that all of this stuff seems to collide. Do you have a ham radio workbench?
Oh, of course. Yeah. In my ham shack in the back, in the real ham shack.
Right now what I'm looking at is Irwin Allen's The Time Tunnel. So you're up in the control tower of the Time Tunnel.
No, that's a background only. I do have a picture of me. If you go to QRZ.com, my picture is there going like this, thumbs up. And from it's a very messy ham shack, the way I like it. I got cables and radios all over the place, always constantly working on new systems and old systems. And so I can upload a picture if you want to. But
do you have a favorite piece of test equipment on your workbench that you just couldn't live without, but something more than a multimeter?
Yeah, I have the MFJ antenna analyzer. I love that one. And also the Nano VNA. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Nano VNA.
Yeah, I have that. That's beautiful. I mean,
for the price, it's amazing.
It's amazing. You know, that's what I use for my radio telescope to tune that feed horn exactly 1.4 gigahertz with SWR of 1 across 2 megahertz of range. Megabytes. Those are my favorites. And the ohm meters, I have an assortment of ohm meters. You know, I do have a old analog ohm meter, Bakelite, but I forget. I'd have to go look at it. I kept it, and it still works. It's in mint condition, but I don't know what the brand.
We will return to our guests in just a moment. A new way to show your support of the QSO Today podcast is to buy me a coffee. I consume gallons of coffee to create this weekly podcast. Invite me for coffee by pushing the yellow button, Buy Me a Coffee, on the QSO Today show notes page. And now back to our QSO Today. Do you think that your hydrogen line radio telescope, if you were trying to think of an activity that might pull younger people into ham radio, do you think something like this is a way to do it, or have you had any thoughts about what we might do to make amateur radio interesting to younger people?
That's a very interesting question. I've been thinking about it. There is no practical need for a ham radio anymore. Yes, in case of an emergency, maybe. But the way I explain it to people is like this. Whenever I want to eat fish, I go to the nearest supermarket and I buy some fish. But there are fishermen who use this as a sport. And they go to the basics and they catch the fish themselves. It's a sport. Same with ham radio. In my case, it's in my DNA since I was a kid, so I don't need any inducement to become a ham radio or to continue with it. For a kid, you have to find some sort of fun, inducement, goals, destinations, and you have to speak their languages. Because otherwise, you can't tell them that in case of an emergency and everybody dies, you're going to be using ham radio. You got to make it fun. And that's the key. How do you make it fun? Well, you have to reach them through TikTok. You have to reach them. Even Facebook is old. It's old news right now.
You know, Facebook did something funny. They renamed their company to Meta.
Meta, which in Hebrew means...
she's dead. We're laughing here in Israel over the new Facebook name.
Yeah, well, Facebook's even old news. So you have to make it fun for kids, and you have to give them a destination and a reason why they want to do that. So you want to do this as a sport. You want to do this to prove yourself, to train yourself, because when you train for ham radio, that prepares you for all kinds of possibilities in the technical world and non-technical. It helps you use your brain to overcome challenges, to learn new things. and you can make it fun. It's fun to be able to communicate with people all over the world by using a wire in no internet connection, nothing. So you have to make it somehow a sport.
Like the fishermen, you're fishing for DX, maybe, or signals from space?
Right. Signals from space, fishing from DX, fishing for DX for long-distance communications. And also you can do internet through a ham radio, I've done WinLink, where you can send emails by using ham radio. You can connect. You can actually talk to people from your computer. You can use, what is the name now? Echolink. If you have a computer, you can actually talk to people all over the world through your computer using your internet and ham radio. So the possibilities are endless. And it helped me in aviation, too, because the discipline that I've learned in ham radio, learning different systems and everything else, it helped me learn systems about airplanes. And, of course, you got to use a radio when you're flying an airplane. Of course, many times when I was on a jetliner and a Learjet, jetliners from the 767, MD-80, and ultimately the Airbus A321, which I flew until I retired, you can actually get on the air because they have HFs. And so I would get on, like, flying a Hawaiian, middle of Hawaiian, you're plotting position reports, and it's boring, and we're both awake, but, hey, let's make a couple of contacts. I don't know if it's 100% legal, but I did it anyway, and I used to get pileups on 20 meters, 40 meters, because I was aeronautical mobile, and I did that many, many times. It opens possibilities for everything. It's useful in every aspect of your life. Ham radio, it's still useful in that aspect.
One of the things that I discovered about you, which probably anybody that Googles you finds out this, but according to IMDb, you are an actor, comedian, producer, director, editor, and entertainment jack of all trades. Now, it seems to me that being an airline pilot, you wouldn't have any time to be all these things, but now that you're retired, you probably have a lot of time to do these things, but you have a whole bunch of credits that go back many, many years. You've kind of done everything in the film industry. How did that start?
Well, it started in back when I was in my 30s, and I was flying all these rich movie stars and everything else in 20s and the 80s and everything else, and I always wanted to be a stand-up comedian. It's something I always wanted to do. And even as an airline pilot, you never do jokes over the PA. That's a bad idea. I never did. People don't want to hear jokes when they're flying, and you have their lives in your hands. They want serious people, preferably that sound like Chuck Yeager with a Southern accent.
Not too much accent. A gentleman's accent.
That's one of the reasons why I got rid of my Argentinian accent. It's because I wanted to be an airline pilot, and it wouldn't sound. People wouldn't appreciate if I went, "Hello, this is your capitán speaking. Welcome to the airplane." So that's part of my comedy, by the way. But it's there's some truth to it. So I would get on, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain speaking. Welcome aboard American Airlines. 1, 2, 3." I would try to jack up my Southern accent a little bit. So I'd say, "Hey, this guy is Chuck Yeager Jr. or something." So so I used to go and do open mics in New York on layovers and stuff like that, but never in the airplane. The airplane is 100% serious business, and there's no room for comedy.
It looks like you produce a lot of films. They look like short films mostly.
Yeah. I went to film school in 2007, and because I was interested as an actor. I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild since 2001, member of the Screen Actors Conservatory. So I've been going to acting schools for the past 20-some years, from improv classes, comedy classes, and everything else. I find it, I lived in a world, the aviation world is very serious, very constrained, so you don't have a lot of opportunities to show your creative side. So it's a fantastic outlet for someone who was in the aviation world for the past, since almost 40 years. Actually, yeah. 42 years that I've been doing aviation, making a living out of aviation. So it gave me an outlet, and it allows you to maintain an even keel, even under, and being an improviser. Oh, by the way, you're talking about the movies. Yes, I usually got the scripts. I'm not a script writer, and I would produce and direct the movies, film them myself, and then present it to festivals. I have 2 movies. One is a World War II black and white movie who got picked up by a festival, and I still do 1 or 2 movies a year whenever I can. I have all the equipment, and I produce it myself.
And now, can we see your movies? Are they like on YouTube, or are they on Netflix?
Yeah, well, one of them's on Netflix, YouTube. Yeah, there's short films. Yeah, you can go to YouTube.
I'll look, and I'll put those into the show notes page.
Especially the World War II one, black and white. Some of you guys are going to like it. It's very emotional, actually. The plot is a couple in L.A. They have a kid in Europe, and it's D-Day, and one of their kids is landing on Omaha Beach. So that's all I'm going to say.
We'll make sure that we put that up. What do you think the greatest challenge is facing ham radio now?
Well, I think you mentioned it. Getting kids interested in this, you have to find a new equation. You have to find a new algorithm, if you will, to attract millennials into the fold of ham radio operators. Also, you have to train the people that are already there to be more welcoming. One of the things that and I don't want to get negative, but one of the reasons I don't get on 2 meters or voice anymore is because people are not as welcoming as they used to be when I started. You could talk about aviation, you can talk about all kinds of things. Nowadays, it's in the U.S., and I'm only speaking about the U.S., it's becoming more and more, how shall I put it, aggressive. It's not as welcoming as it used to be. There are pockets of people that are really nice, and I don't want to generalize, but not when you go on 2 meters, or people don't talk about radios like we used to, or equipment, or how to better an equipment or anything else. I don't know. They talk about personal stuff, politics sometimes.
I think ham radio operators reflect the general population, and I think at this point in these days that people have a shorter attention span, so long conversations are difficult, I think. And also I think that we seem to be more supercharged on everything.
Yeah, we should go back to concentrating on the technical aspects of ham radio, or friendship aspects of meeting people who are in Siberia and actually talking to someone in Antarctica or something like that. The magic that you have a little box with a little wire and you can actually communicate with people all over the world, or radio astronomy, where you can actually, with very modest equipment, you can detect something from so far away. That opens up so many possibilities in a kid's future. They can go from ham radio, from the technical aspects and the friendship aspects of ham radio, they can branch off into all kinds, from aviation to science to even filmmaking to even acting. If you're one of the great things about being an improviser, taking improv classes, is that most of us who are technical are trained to look at things in a certain directional linear way. With improvisation, for example, it teaches you to look at an item from different angles, different possibilities, to be creative. You can actually become creative not only in the artistic sense, but in the technical sense. You start thinking about, hey, well, what about if I do this? Everybody's doing this, but what if I look at it this way, from this angle here? Nobody's looked at it from this angle. So I think ham radio is all encompassing. It's important in that way.
Because we're at the bottom, or we were at the bottom of the sunspot cycle, where you hook it up and it doesn't work. There's nobody out there, or everyone's listening and no one's calling CQ. That kind of reflects the general mode of the public in general. And so I have this idea that perhaps as sunspot cycle 25 comes up, we're already seeing right now that things are kind of blooming in terms of being able to talk around the world, that'll create some new excitement, that it will either have people working more stations, trying out new things, and maybe that will help create this renaissance and these friendly conversations that were kind of lacking because there was nothing spectacular happening. If you weren't technical. For me, I'm technical, so everything that's happening in ham radio is spectacular. But if that's not where you're at...
Absolutely. There's nothing as exciting in being in your car and being able to talk to somebody halfway around the world with only 10 or 11 watts, which I used to do when it was totally open. I used to get on 10 meters. It was like an everyday situation, be able to get South America or Australia or Europe from my car. It blew me away. Signals of 9 plus 20 dBs. That was back when it was open. And if that happens again, it's going to be a game changer. Absolutely.
Frankly, last weekend there was a CQ Worldwide, I think, that was going on. Here in Israel, I heard K3LR. Maybe that's not hard, but I've never heard K3LR on 15 meters direct, and they were blasting in here into Israel. So kind of like getting excited because everything has been kind of, at the bottom for so long. So this new sunspot cycle has got me thinking that I'll get on the air more.
And I also heard that kids find it some kids find it exciting to use Morse code to communicate among their friends, to keep secrets and everything else. And that there's a renaissance of that. And there's nothing more exciting than creating a little 1-watt transmitter and with Morse code being able to communicate halfway around the world or 1,000 miles away.
Exactly. I think we're coming up on it. Do you have advice that you give to newer returning hams?
Yeah, get on FT8. It's awesome. FT8, you'll be able to, with 10 watts, you can communicate with all over the world. Whisper, it's awesome. And Morse code. Try Morse code, CW, slow speed. That's exciting. And get any radio's good. A lot of people say, no, you got to get an FT991 or you got to get a... No, get anything. Get on eBay and spend $150 on a TS120 and get on the air.
We all have radios that we're not using. As the sunspot cycle is improving, these old radios will be great. They'll be absolutely great. If you've got a kid or somebody that wants to just get on the air, let them borrow it, let them have it, whatever it takes to just get more activity.
You can get a decent, at least in the U.S., you can get a decent station for a couple $100 off eBay.
And a wire antenna, like the G5RV or something.
A single wire, with an antenna tuner. You don't need any more. And take it from there.
A wet noodle is going to really work well at this point. That's very exciting. Well, Pablo, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. This is a lot of fun, and it's different. And I like the aviation conversation, because I'm a guy that will probably never get into aviation, even though that's something I've always wanted to do. You never can tell. Maybe things will change. So with that, I want to thank you so much for joining me on QSO Today and wish you 73.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Pablo. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in WA6RSV in the search box at the top of the page. My thanks to ICOM America for its support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of ICOM America by clicking on their banner in the show notes pages. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any other episode into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages, or use my Amazon link before shopping at Amazon. Amazon gives me a small commission on your purchases while at the same time protecting your privacy. I'm grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference as I head towards episode 400. QSO Today is now available in the iHeart Radio, Spotify, YouTube, and a bunch of other online audio services, including the iTunes Store. Look on the right side of the show notes pages for a listing of these services. You can use the Amazon Echo and say, "Alicia, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn." My thanks to Ben Bresky, who edits every single show and allows both this host and my guest to sound brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Until next time, this is Eric, 4Z1UG, 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.